welcome everyone. First of all, let me say good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening to all the participants around the world. Welcome to my presentation, and it's really my great honor today to be the first presenter in the ESP, module and talk to you a bit about like highly specific ESP course. If you guys are ready, let me start sharing my PowerPoint slides, which will guide through my whole presentation today. Could you guys let me know whether you can see my PowerPoint sharing?
Yes, it's all fine. Perfect. Thank you, Vicky.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, as Maria mentioned, you are welcome to leave any questions you might have, during the talk or even after the talk. So as you guys can see, my topic for today is called the benefits and limits of highly specialized ESP courses in a global context. And my name is Vicky, and I'm from University of Macau. And here is the outline of my presentation today. So first of all, I'm just going to give you guys some background information about ESP teaching. I'm sure most of the audiences here should be quite familiar with ESP teaching. Don't mind me, reminding you guys again, ESP, how do we approach ESP? And then I'm going to talk to you about my current study and show you guys a bit of my ESP course and how I approached my ESP course, and then how my students actually think about my ESP course. And then I'm also going to show you guys another pilot study that I'm now working on. With that, I would like to show everyone, maybe some tips on how do we solve some challenges as an ESP teachers. And as Maria mentioned in the beginning, there would be a short Q&A section. So here are 4 definitions about ESP teaching. And as you guys can see, different definitions, they might focus on different aspects of ESP, but somehow they are quite overlapping with one another. So the first one here, proposed by Houston and Waters in 1987, very early on for ESP study, they proposed that ESP is actually considered as an approach to language teaching in which all decisions as to content and method are based on the learner's reason for learning. And with this definition, it actually focuses more on the language instruction to the specific needs and goals of the learner. And then moving on with the second definition, it actually focuses more on the research-oriented nature of ESP, and especially it focuses on the language used in specific domains. As you can see, it says apply linguistics that focuses on the study of language and communication in a specific context. And especially that would be in the academic context and occupational domains. And then the third definition here, it focuses more on the practical and task-based nature of ESP instruction. So here, the definition says, the teaching of English to meet specific needs of learners, usually related to their work, studies, or even their hobbies. And in the end, this definition highlights the focus of ESP on language used in specific domain or professional context. It actually very similar to the second definition here we just focused on. So in short, ESP basically would be the study or the teaching of English in a specific context to students' needs in particular in their work or occupational purposes. And then usually what we teach in these kind of English courses, I would like to put that as a continuum, as also kind of proposed by Basterman in 2003. So here I would like to propose that actually the spectrum from the general English to the Common Core ESP or EAP, and then finally to the very focused and narrow-angled EAP, ESP, or EOP is actually a scale of specificity. So as you guys can see from the very left-hand side here, starting from the general English, from there we actually focus more on the skills and the systems of the English language itself. like listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And then from that, students have to also learn to how to, learn to apply the language as well. And then moving on to the middle, the common ground ESP or EAP are composed of students from a wider range of subject areas. And usually from that kind of module, that would address core academic skills shared by different disciplines. For example, listening, note-taking skills, referencing, APA, MLA, participating in seminars or academic discussions, or even formal academic writing style, or conducting academic research. So as you guys can also see that from the Common Core ESP or EAP, that would basically defined it by the users or the learners, for example, business English. Or defined by the purpose itself. For example, academic speaking skills. If you guys want to learn more about those, I have also put a reference downstairs so that from that paper you can read more about their in-depth study of a course called academic speaking skills. And then from the very end extreme level, the very narrow focused EAP, ESP, EOP, that usually are concerned with the language itself. For example, the structures, vocabulary, academic conventions, or even specific genres, and then particular communicative needs of a particular discipline, such as the law or economics of students. And as you can see here, it usually would be discipline specific. For example, English for law students, or even profession specific, English for pilots and navigators. And then at the bottom here, you can also see kind of like a triangle. Again, it shows you how the scale of specificity works here. From the more general English course, we will start with the broader application of the language. From that, we'll learn a lot of common lexis or the text types. But then as we move towards more narrow focused, then we have to provide students with more specialized knowledge, such as the lexis or the text types would also be more genre specific. So now here, as you guys can see, I have activated a poll, and I would like to just see everyone's, your experience in teaching these scale of specificities courses. I would just like everyone, if you happen to have your phone with you, you could feel free to scan the QR code on the on my PowerPoint slide, and then you can select or tell us which course would you say you teach mostly. Like if you teach general English at work more, you can select GE. If you teach Common Core, the more one fits a variety of subject areas. Common Core ESP, you can select the second one. If you teach a highly narrow focused EAP, then you can select the last one. All right, so as you guys can see, the results are changing now, but I would say that most of our audiences, the majority of us seems to be teaching general English. And the other half may be, okay, so I'm now seeing that narrow gauge angle or gauge EAP is the second option. Well, for me, actually, my daily work here at the University of Macau, I would say most of my work, the English courses that I'm mostly teaching would be Common Core ESP. But this academic year, I was teaching a very narrow angle focused EAP. And that's why I would like to share with you guys about how a Common Core ESP or EAP teacher in a university can approach a very narrow focused EAP course or ESP course. Thank you everyone for your input. That's very interesting. So now guys, let's assess the options just now. Just now we actually focused on Common Core, ESP, EAP, and the narrow angle ESP, EAP. What are some good things about each of them? And then what are some, maybe possible disadvantages of some of them? And here in this table, you can see it's also proposed by Basterman in 2003. from that, you can see the first type of course that we will be addressing in a minute is the narrow focused. Just to remind everyone again, narrow focus, that just means English for a really specific purpose, English for pilots, English for law student, English for economic student. And then the second type and the third type would be for more common core, English for academic purposes, or business English or academic English that could be found from, most universities in their English language center. Now, just to go through some of the advantages with you guys for the very narrow focused EAP or ESP, as you guys can see, for sure, those kind of courses, they really fit the specific needs of the student. And from that could also benefit from a social constructive perspective as well as the psychological perspectives, because the social constructive theory suggests that actually language learning happens through language communities. And then if we actually design materials that suits a particular group of students, that makes learning more effective. And then from the psychological perspective, that also suggests that if we consider the needs of the student, that could enhance their motivation, and which indeed could also lead to greater learning. However, there are also quite a lot of disadvantages of very narrow ESP design. And on the right-hand side, you can see three main disadvantages proposed by Basterman. So the first one, if we focus too much on a specific, the specific needs of the student, that might actually pose a restraint or constraint on the students in terms of the language use. So in other words, students might not be able to use the language creatively, and they might just focus on some or surface linguistic forms, then which makes the whole program like a training rather than education. And then also from a very narrow ESP, most of the time we might also be focusing on a specific set of phrases or speech acts. For an example, we might focus on ways to make requests or expressions for greeting, or even writing in some professional genres only. So in other words, let's just put it simply, it might be too specific. And then the second disadvantage is that actually it's also quite rare that all the learners in your group might have the same communicative needs, even though they are from the same field of study. As an example, for example, engineers might work in different areas, such as a factory floor or an office setting. So different roles for engineering students, they might also have different needs. And then thirdly, if we designed two highly specific language courses, it actually requires a lot of work from the teachers. Because first of all, teachers need to know what their student needs. So they need to spend time in kind of conducting research, for example, need analysis. And also teacher needs to spend a lot of time to, develop materials or to prepare for the course. So it's time consuming. And also, like if we have to conduct a very in-depth investigation for a certain group of students' needs, as a teacher, we might also need to justify why should we spend the time and effort to do that. Is it that like the course will be replicated, or like it would be, running several times in the future? So basically, that would be some possible disadvantages for a very highly narrow ESP course. And then also here is the second type of course. Now I'm just going to go through the common core very quickly, because that would not be quite of our main focus today. But as you can see, for the common core ESP courses, the good thing is one common core that could fit the common needs of many students, and that would be very practical and economical. And the second advantage is also that, like, if we develop a common core for for an English course, then we do not need to, invest human resources to develop a new course for a specific group. So basically, it's kind of like one that fits a mixed group of students. However, some disadvantages, again, they might be challenged for not focusing on the students' need. And usually we have the assumption that there are some generic or general skills that the students need to learn. However, like what kind of those skills would be, that has to be kind of decided or discussed among teachers. And also different students from different majors, they might have different style of writing as well. But however, if we just teach a common writing style, does that actually fit every student's need? And then also here is kind of like very similar aspects of what we just discussed, the type 3, very common core ESP. Again, do we actually, like having the terms academic English or scientific English, like the generic labels like that, does it really capture the complexity of the curriculum design that we have? So that would be some advantages and disadvantages. Now, because my talk today, again, would be focusing more on the narrow approach. So I'm now gonna also talk to you guys about, so which one should we go? Like which direction do we actually go, like from that spectrum of specificists? I would say everyone, you could consider 3 things when you are designing a very narrow focused ESP course. First of all, the stakeholder expectations, because usually they might have some assumptions or some suggestions already for what students should learn, and also for let's take a look at an example. For example, the expectation of the learners or their sponsors of the ESP course, or even the colleagues who are working with them, they might know which areas that the student needs some training on. So we have to take that into consideration. And then secondly, what kind of needs the student have. For example, if the learners in a highly specific EOP situation, they are often using English for communication with international colleges, and we might also need to know or find out what they need. And then also, one thing to keep in mind is also the learners' levels. For example, there is some studies saying that it would be more beneficial for students with a higher level to have the narrow focus ESP course, whereas the general English input would be needed for students with lower efficiency. And then I also would like to add a few more considerations, which would be the teaching goal. Now, if you have already decided whether you want to go narrow focused or whether you want to go a bit more general, then after you have decided that, the next thing you have to consider would also be the ESP materials. So now I'm sure all of you also know that commercially, there are many publications of ESP materials, and they are by nature very narrow focused, and they are also they also believe that that is the way to go. And in the last 20 years, there are just so many these kind of textbooks are now out in the market. However, sometimes when we select these materials, we have to be cautioned because they might look a bit phased validity. They might look like what the sponsors or perhaps the learners think the course should be, but we have to kind of see whether the materials inside really suit the needs of the student. And also, obviously, the second way to go is also like self-developed materials. And also, we also have to kind of find out learners' needs. For example, running a need analysis, it's very important, suggested by the literature. However, it might not be as simple as we think it could be, because this might be impractical to run a very detailed need analysis, because in the end, maybe after you have run a need analysis, then your supervisor or maybe your stakeholder may tell you that, okay, so this is what your students need, and you just have to follow that trend. So you have to kind of evaluate whether that really fits your scenario. Also, authentic materials and observations from the learner's work, that could be very helpful as well. So stakeholders' expectations and other informants' expectations, they also have to be considered. All right, so now I'm gonna tell you guys a bit about my teaching context in Macau. So basically, Macau, it's often called the Las Vegas of the East. So there are so many casinos here in Macau, and the official language here in Macau is Chinese and Portuguese. And as you can see, English is not one of the official language here. However, most of the students here, they started to learn English since kindergarten. But even so, English and Portuguese are by far the least used by the residents in Macau. As you can see, the actual English usage in Macau is more for the accuracy and correction focus, because students, they are exam-oriented when they learn English rather than, using it for communicative purpose. From this context, and this semester, as I mentioned, I taught a course for firefighter officer from an institute in Macau. So it's called Escola Superior das Forças de Segurança de Macau. I'm sorry for my Portuguese because I couldn't quite speak Portuguese. So the ESFSM. Basically, they work with University of Macau, and they actually invite teachers from our center to hold their English language course. So that's why I was invited to teach their course. However, from that school, they do not really provide any clear guideline or specific requirement for their English course. So that's why I have complete discretion and autonomy when I am designing this ESP course. And then I taught this course for 2 hours each week, and I've got 10 students. They are all male. And then how I actually approached my ESP course, basically I framed my course called English for Firefighter Officers. As you can see, I adopted the very, very highly narrow-focused ESP. And I basically have followed Basterman's suggestions for the course development. So from the level 1, I basically investigate students' needs. Now, because I've got complete autonomy, and I have done a survey for need analysis to kind of ask them for their self-perceived English level, for their work situations that they need English for, what kind of aspects they would like to improve. And I also looked at some authentic materials available online and kind of see in which kind of situations firefighters in Macau, they need English for. And luckily, I have got to know one of my prospective students from this program, who is actually happened to be my classmate from my primary school. So I kind of have talked to him a lot about what do you guys expect to learn and what do you guys need English for in work. So basically, I kind of know a lot already before the course started. And from that, I then designed my course materials and curriculum. But at the first day as well, I also held a diagnostic speaking and writing with them to find out their actual English level. And here is kind of like my curriculum design. As you guys can see, actually, this curriculum is a combination of a bit of the general English and the narrow-focused ESP, because from the results of my survey, it's kind of necessary for me to provide my students with some sort of general English input, because some of them, their level is not quite up to standard yet. So I do think that that would be helpful for them to know a bit about like the sentence structure and also describing numbers in English. And then for other topics, as you all can see, they are all related to firefighting. For example, fire accidents, writing fire analysis report. And then this whole curriculum was drafted based on the results of my need analysis, but it's also constantly being revised based on the mid-semester survey and also their progress of learning. And this is my curriculum for the second term. Again, I actually make a bit of Common Core ESP now and narrow focus ESP because I want to kind of like improve them for their writing skills at the beginning of the second semester. And then for a more general topic, such as how do they deal with their stress at work and life. Because at the beginning of the second semester, I asked them for feedback for like what kind of things they want to learn. And interestingly, some of them proposed topics that are not even very ESP oriented. They actually said they want to learn something about tourism English. Yeah. So here are just some of my data that I would like to share with all of you after kind of I've run the whole program with them and then their perception of this program. In short, actually, all of them are quite satisfied with this course design. As you can see, the mean would be 9.6. I'm sorry, I didn't include the score. 1 means they are not satisfied at all. 10 means they are very satisfied. So as you can see, they are very satisfied with the course design. And some of the reasons are because they feel like the curriculum suits their needs at work. And then the content that they learn is very useful to their career. And the content used also at their level. And then they also kind of mentioned something about a very pleasant learning environment. However, there are also some improvements suggested by my students. They think that they also want to watch more movies. Again, maybe they want to get away of some, very specialized ESP content already. And then they also want a bit more of the speaking exercises that is related to their firefighting works. For example, giving order to the team or evacuation order. And here would be, because I've also asked them to rate how useful they think for each topic that they learn in a semester, because I want to see whether they would have more preferences to the general English input or more preferences to the very narrow focus ESP input. Surprisingly, they actually rated that all the topics are very useful to them. And that's basically because, again, like that are very useful for their career. And also some of them mentioned that because their English level is not quite good and they think that the general English input, the sentence structure is actually helpful to them. And yeah, that is actually related to their job skills. And then they think that they can enhance their firefighting related knowledge. But obviously some negative feedback would be that they think they want less worksheets from class. And then here would be for my second semester, the topic. Again, I also want to see whether they would have some sort of preferences. But again, they all show very positive thinking here and perceptions here. For all the topics, they all think that, they are all very useful for them. Some reasons, again, it could help them for their career and personal development. And they also feel like the soft skills that they learn in the second semester, for example, how do they handle stress at work is useful for them. And also they could enhance their social skills and communicative skills, because in the second semester, we actually learn email writing. However, they also mentioned that the English grammar part is not quite useful to some of them, because I guess that feedback is from a more advanced student. And so he might prefer more firefighting related knowledge. And then here would be their self-rated proficiency cost and then the pro cost. As you guys can see here, I asked students to rate their skills in 4 English aspects, and 1 basically means very poor, 2 basic, 3 good, and 4 excellent. As you can see, before the course started, all of them rated their level or their skills as very low. However, on the right-hand side, after the course, they kind of rated their proficiency a bit higher, and that statistically, listening, speaking, and reading kind of like improve as well, however, not writing. And here are just like some showcase of the materials I used. And as you can see, I developed a lot of my own materials. I didn't go with any textbook that are available. One reason is because, first of all, this is a very small class, and also it's not, I do not really have access to their school support, so I decided not to go with a textbook. And here, the authentic materials, they are all from, open sources, either YouTube or TED Talks. And from that kind of materials, I focus on a very specific genre, like again, firefighting, and I focus more on the meaning and the language use rather than, pure grammar training. And here would be the material for reading. Again, I adopted those readings from open sources that I can find online, and I adopted those reading materials, and I developed materials accordingly. And here would be their speaking tasks. As you can see, those are some tasks that students have produced. For example, they were asked to talk about their life as a firefighter, or what kind of qualities would good firefighters to have. And then they also have to analyze a particular type of fire in their field. For example, arson, smoking fire, and then wildfire in Macau. And then on the right-hand side, the last project that they work on would be more generic, but again, focusing on their job, like how do they handle dismays or conflicts or uncertainties or mental stress at work as a firefighter. They have to provide some suggestions and advice to their classmates. And here would be the writing materials. Again, I adopted some authentic material from government website, and then I basically provided some guidelines for my students to replicate some writing like this. So this is the goal that I set from my student, and I run a lesson on that. And then from that, I set a writing report for my students as a final assessment. So for that, they have to show me 4 elements in a fire analysis report. And on the right-hand side, you can see a sample of student work. So basically, they all fulfill the requirement of giving me 4 main components in a fire analysis report. So I would say that the outcome is quite effective. All right, a quick summary of my first research is that the majority of them actually prefers the blended mode of ESP curriculum design. That means they don't have any, they actually quite enjoy a little bit input of the general English and then ESP, or input from like Common Core academic English and then ESP. And a few of them only prefers GE general English, 2 of them, and then 1 of them prefers very narrow focused ESP, although the current curriculum is really more narrow focused. From the written feedback from the student, I also can tell that students with lower level proficiency, they show positive feedback for general English and academic English inputs, whereas the students with higher proficiency, they show more positive feedback for the very specific ESP inputs. And then they are all highly satisfied with the course design, as it suits their learning and occupational needs, and also the material designs are at their level and especially related to their profession. Now, I'm aware that my time is kind of running out very quickly, and I would just like to share with you guys a very, very, early stage of my pilot study. Like, what are some challenges and suggestions for ESP teaching? I actually asked around my colleagues who have got ESP experience, and then I asked them 2 questions basically. What are some of the challenges that you have faced when you are teaching an ESP course, and how or what you have done to deal with these challenges? So now I'm going to share with you guys what they told me. Originally, I would like some input from you guys as well, but because of the time, I might skip this part. You are welcome to share your ideas and views with us, maybe in the chat box, so that I can come back later to take a look at the chat box. So when teaching ESP courses, what challenges have you faced and how did you handle it? So you are welcome to share with us in the chat box. So now from the input of my colleagues, I actually have divided the challenges into 5 parts. Target communicative needs, stakeholders' expectations, ESP materials, teachers and learners are the 5 common challenges that they faced. So for an example, target communicative needs. So the challenges are making the learning of English relevant to their needs, and also how do we customize the instruction according to the real needs of the students? Well, how do they solve this problem? One suggestion is that we might need to do a detailed needs analysis or assessment, so that could kind of inform us what kind of grammatical or lexical supports we have to provide as a whole, and what are some individuals' needs and goals. And then you could also think of doing a grammar and vocabulary test at the beginning, requesting a writing sample from your student, or even conducting an interview with them. Negotiated syllabus could also be considered if you are having more flexibilities with the curriculum design. Field work, you might also go out to their field or to their industry to observe language learning opportunities so that you can identify the needs of the student. Theme-based teaching is also mentioned. Probably we can set some theme that are related to their, their occupation, and from that we can target specific vocabulary items, language use, conversational patterns, or even tasks. However, the stakeholder expectations provide some challenges for the teachers as well. Let's say the different expectations between learners and stakeholders, and also somehow as a teachers, we might be forced to follow a fixed curriculum or even learning content by decision makers. So in that case, as a teacher, we might have to follow a flexible and target situation-driven approach, allow ourselves to have more flexibilities in terms of our teaching style, material selection, course design, or even attitude. And also, we can try our best to make our content useful and meaningful for our students' daily lives. And ESP materials are another challenge for the ESP teacher. For example, the time investment in creating our own material, not enough materials online or available, or even a lot of them often require us to buy them. And also, even if you use an ESP textbook, we might have to provide many supplementary materials. So those would be some possible challenges for teachers. Some possible solutions. First, don't be afraid to use your students as the learning source, resources, because you can ask them all the time, like, what do you guys need at work? Sometimes I told my student, I'm not the expert, you are, so you have to tell me or correct me if I'm wrong, because you are the experts in your field. And also, don't put too much stress on ourselves. As an ESP teacher, we have to keep a positive mindset that it's an opportunity for us to kind of learn something new to us. From the teachers, some challenges would be like we might not have enough subject knowledge, or we might not know what our students are doing in their industry, or we might even have to learn something in their industry. So here we have to kind of train ourselves, adapt a self-training approach, or even do reflective teaching. From the learners, sometimes students might have very mixed students' ability. Their motivation might not be too high. They might not even know why they are taking this course. Also, maybe some students are also quite old already, so they might not have a good learning experience before. So in that case, some possible solutions are, differentiating our instructions based on the level of the students. Maybe we have got different instructions for better students or even lower level students. We also need to make our instruction very clear, or make the ILOs very clear to the student at the beginning, how this course can help their career. We also have to assure that students make mistakes. It's okay. And also we can adopt a recursive instruction so that, students can use the knowledge learned the whole semester. All right, so that basically would be my pilot study. And in short, I do hope that all ESP teachers could have more rooms, autonomies, and flexibilities, because for me, my very positive feedback from my students this semester, I do think that it's because I have got full and complete autonomies in terms of curriculum design and material selection. That would be my upshot. Thank you, everyone. I would just like to show my acknowledgements to the following parties, especially the organizers, my research partner, Mr. Jeremy Phillips, and my students in this ESP course, and my colleagues who provided me with, the very, very useful advice for the audiences today, and obviously all presenters and audiences today. Thank you so much for your attention. And to end my talk, I would just like to pause it here. As I mentioned, this is just my pilot study, and I would like to also know more about how ESP teachers think of ESP teaching. So if you have some time after the talk, you are welcome to scan this QR code to tell us more about your view, so that I can share more with you guys in the future. Thank you so much.